Next up here is the interview we did a few days back with Dave Haynie.
Yeah.
And I don't think that man needs any introduction really. He's an absolute legend within the especially Amiga community. And fun thing is that he's still active. He's still into developing stuff, and he was there. He was there early on in Commodore history, and really tried to stay in there and keep the things alive. So we had a great chat with him. We'll just turn over to Dave Haynie.
Welcome to Forndata, Dave. We're truly honored to have such a prominent guest here with us today. I mean, if there's one figure that is so closely linked to the Amiga and the heritage of the entire platform, it's you. Could you just tell us a bit about how did it all start with you with computing, and how did you end up with Commodore and the Amiga
Well, let's see. Computer. Actually, the first computer I ever programmed was a calculator. My dad had brought home a HP desktop calculator. Thing must have weighed, I don't know, 20 kilograms. It was gigantic, and you could store programs on magnetic cards, and you could play games with numbers. And so I started playing a couple of these games while he was not worrying about it. And eventually I started changing the codes and writing my own. And then that went back, and I kept bugging him for a computer of some sort. And he was getting me onto the Bell Labs, his department computer at Bell Laboratories over the weekend, because back in those days nobody worked weekends. So he brought home a TI printing terminal with thermal paper, a roll of paper, and I could learn BASIC and Fortran until the paper roll that ran out, and then I'd have to wait until the next weekend. Eventually, in I guess '77, my best friend Scott got a PET computer. We went to the island of Manhattan, New York City. There was one computer store that had the PET computer. It was actually not really a store at all. It was one room office building, one room in an office building, and on one side was the PET, the other side was the Apple II. And we had both decided the PET was the better deal. So I was learning to program that. A few years later, I bought an Exidy Sorcerer, which almost nobody's ever heard of. And I was using that as my main personal computer until after college. My first year out of college, I was rebuilding a house, doing some carpentry and electrical work and stuff for a house my mom and her business partner had bought. A terrible little house. I think they spent $25,000 to buy the whole house and property. And I kept some stuff over there. One night I was away and it was robbed. It was looted or burglarized or whatever. They took my XD Sorcerer, and it wasn't like you could just go and get another one.
No.
They basically didn't exist. And so I got a Commodore 64. That was the summer of '83. And I had also started working at General Electric, and I didn't like it because they were working on nuclear bombs, and I didn't want to have anything to do with that. So, or nuclear weapons, nuclear rockets to deliver the bombs. They weren't actually making the bombs. And so I ended up going to a headhunter, to look for a new job. And it's tough because I'd only been working there for 4 months out of college. And they said, "Oh, okay." And a few days later, I got a call, and I went in for a meeting, and I met this guy looked like John Lennon sitting in the waiting room. And it's like, "Hey, here for an interview?" And he's like, "Yeah, how about you?" "Oh, yeah, kind of, And so they brought me in and introduced me to this guy in the suit, which you'd expect, John Krasuki, who was the head of engineering at Commodore. And then they brought me back, and there's that John Lennon looking guy who turned out to be Bil Herd. And he asked me a bunch of questions, and he showed me an op amp with some diodes on it, and I told him that that limited the saturation, and he asked me if I knew Laplace transforms, and I started to write stuff out, and I just want to know if you know them, because I don't, and a bunch of other things. And then I felt pretty good about it, and that Monday they wanted me to come out to the plant, and so I skipped work and went out to the plant, and they offered me a job on the spot, and so I left General Electric, went to Commodore, and expected to be there forever. Only problem was that didn't quite work out. That's kind of how I got started at Commodore. They were working on the +4 in those days, and it wasn't really supposed to be the +4, but that's kind of how the marketing people were pushing it. We called it the 264, and there was also a 364, which I was in charge of that for about the time between they gave me the project and then they canceled the project. It was about 2 weeks.
Okay.
But it was basically just a 264 with an extra long keyboard had a numeric keypad, and it also had a version of Tragic Voice built into it.
Okay.
It wasn't as good as Sam. I remember the speech synthesizer, because it had words in ROM. So like while I was working on the system in the lab, some of the technicians would fire up Sam and start yelling, start cursing at me and stuff, and I had my vocabulary of like 260 words, and I was trying to say terrible things about them in the very limited vocabulary of the built-in speech synthesizer. So from there, it was the Commodore 128. Actually, I worked on the LCD machine. There was a Commodore LCD machine that Jeff Porter started working on, and he had me take apart a Tandy 100 and basically write up a report on all the stupid shit they did, and then all the good stuff. And oh boy, that thing was a mess too. It had like jumpers on it, and had some capacitors hung here and there, and I guess we got an early copy. And I worked on that for about a month, and then Bill got the 128 project and wanted me to come along to the 128 project. So 128 from there, and then after the 128, we didn't really nobody had given us a project. So Bil Herd left the company. He kind of burnt out on getting the whole thing done. I was still there, and the other hardware guy, Frank Paleo, was still there. So we decided we were going to make a C256. We made 2 different prototypes. He made one that ran CPM at 4 megahertz instead of 2 megahertz. And I made one that had the 256K of memory with, they had made a version of the MMU that could do that. And of course I had to do all the circuitry to wire it in place on top of the old RAM, and it worked. And okay, fine, we're not interested. And it wasn't too much longer that they sent me over to help George Robbins on the Amiga 500. And the plan was, now I had learned about the Amiga already, because when the Amiga 1000 came out, I got one. I had read the book. In fact, when we first got books in Westchester, it was the Green Book, if you've seen that. The original ROM kernel manual, everything all in one Green Book. We had to sign for them. And Bil Herd signed for one. And the very night he had gotten the book, I stayed late and photocopied the whole thing so I could take it home and learn it. Of course, you weren't supposed to do that, but oh well.
It turned out quite nice. Probably a good investment. Yeah.
It was, they were educating me, right? So I had learned. So actually, Amiga OS was much more like the stuff I had been programming under for years than the Commodore 64. Because I mean, I did DEC 20s in college and Unix machines at Bell Labs. So and also even the dial-up machine I was using when I was 12 years old was it was like a Cyber 72 or something like that from Control Data. It was a bigger computer. It wasn't. You didn't have to wait 10 minutes to load everything from tape. So I mean, Amiga seemed, and then you looked at Amiga and like, wow, this is like next level with animation and you know, all the stuff it could do. So I was like really psyched about that, and I'm teaching myself how to program it while I was doing the electronics during the day. So I had no problems going over to help George Robbins out on the Amiga 500, and they sort of figured that I was, since I was the low end guy, I would be taking over the Amiga 500, and George had worked on the CBS, on the Commodore 900, the machine that ran Coherent, looked like, you know, that looked like a little baby Sun workstation that was canceled, which they never should have done. They should have kept that one going too, but because they finally got it working. Yeah, George and Bob Wellen were the third team that took that machine on, and they actually made it work. The previous two had not been successful. So anyway, those actually could have been produced, but Commodore decided that they had their hands full with Amiga or whatever. So, only problem with me taking over the A500 and George moving on to the Amiga 2000 was that George didn't want to give up the A500 because that was his baby, and he'd been working on it for a year. And so I took over the A500.
Yeah.
I mean the A2000. Excuse me. I took over the A2000.
Yeah.
And that was that. I saw the German version, which was basically the that was the Amiga 1000 design with a version of the expansion card app note added onto it. In fact, there was a bug in it, which I didn't find until after I had built the gate array that did the same thing.
Oh well.
So if you ever saw an original Rev 3.9 Amiga 2000, it's got a little tower in it for the Buster chip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that for a while ago.
There was one mistake in there where if there's a DMA device talking to a memory card, the main board buffers don't turn the other way. So there's contention anytime a SCSI drive tries to talk to a hard disk.
Okay.
SCSI drive tries to talk to a RAM card,
Yeah.
which at the time we didn't really have much in the way of RAM cards or hard disks, so there wasn't much testing I was able to do in production, in development. I could from time to time, but there were like real short supplies of those, so we found it later. Anyway.
That must be quite. I mean, with the Amiga, you have the original systems, and then they were so extremely heavily built out and expanded during the years. So it must have been quite hard to find all those bugs and stuff as the hardware. I mean, what came afterwards, a few years after, with the expansion cards and everything. So did you have a lot of similar problems?
Some of it was hard. Some of the bugs were there for years, because when I started doing the Amiga 3000 and the Zorro 3 bus, I found a bunch of cards that completely broke rules for Zorro 2 that just happened to work in an older machine because they got lucky.
Yeah.
Basically. And in the 3000 they didn't get lucky because like for instance, there are signals going across the bus that aren't the same signals when you're not supposed to be looking at the signals. But when you're looking at them, when you're told you can look at them, it's okay. There's an address strobe that comes out. You're okay. Now you're allowed to look at the address bus. Thing was, they were looking at it without bothering to look at the address bus, and so so in fact, the Amiga Live, the live digitizer was one of those devices that was done incorrectly. Turns out they sent me one. I looked at the design. I said, I can fix this without a jumper. I reprogrammed the PAL, put it in there, worked the first time.
That's correct. That's good. Yeah.
I sent them the PAL equations.
Yeah. Did you work closely with the third-party developers to fix such things, or was that a lucky shot? Or
from time to time, when we knew about part of the problem was, it was sort of up to them unless we knew about it, because we didn't, like, we had on hand a few things and we would test those, and it was much more complete over the software side, where they had a cabinet full of practically every bit of software that ever existed. But we couldn't always convince people to send us their hardware. And we weren't, we could have demanded it like Microsoft does, but we didn't do that. So, I wasn't able to test everything, but but of course, that's also why we had developers conferences like we introduced the Amiga 3000 with the Rev B Buster. A lot of stuff could change from there. And that was, most of the compatibility was contained within that chip as far, because the expansion bus and everything. So, changes to that could fix. In fact, we also found it didn't work with the bridge card, which made our CEO or our VP of engineering, Henry Rubin, go crazy at that point, because the bridge card was his baby.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, David, you may rev the chip as many times as you want, as long as my bridge card works.
It seems like there's always, when you talk to people that worked in Commodore, that there was a great passion for the projects. And as you said, you were doing the hardware in the day and software in the evening. And
yeah,
night.
I was that's kind of all I did when I was at Commodore, was Amiga stuff. I might, I'd go on Usenet sometimes and chat, or I'd write articles or whatever. I wrote articles for magazines. I worked on software. I worked on the hardware. Yeah, it really was, because it was that one of those things where, that was our shot, to make this thing we all agreed was great. And I was also building a toy for myself, I'll admit it.
Yeah.
I've worked on other things, but they haven't been for me. This was the only thing I ever really worked on that was for me.
Yeah.
Was that,
you returned to the Amiga community, or maybe you even never left. I don't know. How do you perceive that?
I tried. Here's the thing. I tried to, after Commodore, I tried at 2 different companies to bring it back.
Yeah.
I was consulting and then working with Amiga Technologies and trying to launch them into doing the right thing with with their post Commodore efforts, and then they blew up. And out of that came Pius Computer, which was later Metabox, and we tried everything we could possibly do to get the rights to use Amiga OS. We followed with PowerPC because that's where it looked like the Amiga would have been going if we had kept going straight forward. That was, of course, before Apple killed it. But we were, and after that, I didn't really, after that had failed, I didn't, first of all, they owed me a lot of money, so I actually had to have a paying job. And it was tough, and and then there wasn't really that much going on elsewhere either. I think maybe everyone was just waiting until the point where a single hobbyist or a couple guys could get together and build their own Amiga. And actually, I saw it kind of started all around the same time. We had Jerry and her Commodore 64, and we had Mini Mig. The early ones didn't work all that well, but but it was still like, this, I looked at that and said, yeah, this is gonna it's gonna take some time, but these things are gonna start outperforming Amigas. And also I was trying to help out anywhere I could, basically by publicizing things. I mean, there wasn't much I could do otherwise, but I could call attention to this or that. I like the idea of AROS, or however you pronounce it, AROS, because it's like, the problem I have as an engineer is I'm going to design something new. I need the software to plug into that new thing. And it's awfully hard to do if you can't change the operating system. So there's, all these projects that have been going on. And, I think, it also, when you're doing it as a hobby, or you're doing it part-time, or you're doing it with really small crew, it just takes a lot longer to get things done. On the other hand, now the technology's moved on to the point where, where you can have these things that are, that make hardware more like software. So you don't have to wait a month for a new Commodore gate array, or 6 months for a new custom chip, or, you don't have to spend, $10,000 for a new revision of the board or whatever, or, $150,000 for a new revision of a chip. You know, it started after a while. That starts to be real money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's suddenly.
You know.
Do you for the things you've been doing today within the Amiga community? You started off by sharing and, as you said, sharing the knowledge you had, and as I understand, you've also been starting to actually develop a few things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm working on some stuff for Jens Schoenfeld. I'm not doing it as fast as he probably wants it, but yeah, that's moving forward. Um, it's one of those things where we got to talking to it about 6 months before I was really ready to work on it, but I've been trying to make steady progress. That's recreating the Buster 2 chip
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
and fixing the bugs.
Yeah.
And making some circuit design changes to make it more modern and less likely to fail. That was one of those that there were a lot of issues with that design. And honestly, if I had some good ideas back then, but if I had another 20 years of experience on how well they worked, I might have done things a little differently.
Still, I mean, the amount of things you got out there. I mean, the progress that that Commodore were working and that you were working is amazing. So I think that it's cool that the stuff still works and is so flexible.
Yeah, well, I think that was a big part of it, is that, you know, like, you know, you look at I don't know, Windows, for instance, and I remember a time when I was trying to do video, and I basically had to wait until they put out a whole new version of Windows to get FireWire to work.
No.
It's like, you know, I don't quite understand what it is they do wrong in the operating system there. I mean, I know a few things they do completely wrong, because I actually had to work on Windows a little bit when I was at Scala, and I did not like it at all, because they turned all my beautiful multi-threading into a single queue that went into the window. they could take the best code and make it suck. which kind of explains why, you know, maybe why Windows is just as clunky as it is. I mean, you know, you have to use it sometimes. I mean, I design computers, and that's where all the CAD tools are, right?
Yeah.
So I use Windows.
Yeah.
I'm using it now on my homemade machine that looks like an A3000.
Oh, it does. Great.
A black one.
Oh yes, awesome.
Cool.
Those are so nice. I love the chassis. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really nice. It's got a Blu-ray.
Yeah.
It's got a memory card reader.
Yeah.
And an 8-core Athlon processor.
That's great. We're unfortunately we were quite limited in time, so we're approaching the end of the interview. Yeah, it is fast. We would love to have chatted for 2 hours more, I suppose. But could you tell us what since you're where can we keep track of the things you're doing, and what are you up to today in the related to the Amiga community or other things that you'd like to know about? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have anything that I don't really have a, I mean, I occasionally write about stuff on, social media. I mean, I do a lot of writing online. I just don't, it isn't necessarily about Amiga, because like I write on Quora, but that's usually like somebody asked a question.
Yeah.
I try to follow up with Amiga stuff on there as much as possible, but it's not, that's not a place there's a lot of Amiga people.
Are you on Twitter? So did we follow you there?
I have a Twitter account, but I don't really use it much.
Okay.
I've been trying to use it a little bit more now that Trump is gone.
Yeah. Get it? Yeah.
And I'm on Facebook, of course. You knew that because that's how you contacted me.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I haven't really done anything else, any other social medias. I'm not. I do have an Instagram account, but I kind of hate them because they want all your pictures to be square
Yeah.
and low resolution.
Yeah. So going through the history of your the things you have been working on, what is the most, what are you most proud about? What do you think has the best legacy? Or maybe those are two different things.
My
Yeah.
overall favorite is Amiga 3000, and a lot of that's just because that's probably the closest we ever got to having the team we really should have always had. More, like when I did the Amiga 2000, it was me and whatever questions I could ask of George Robbins.
Mhm.
So, I started, he says, okay, here you go. And he gave me the A500 schematics, and so that was the A1000 part, and I could work out the expansion stuff. But I mean, I was like, I'd been a Commodore for a year and a half at that point, 2 years. So, 2 years. So, it was one of those things where it's like, I loved the fact that I could get that kind of challenge, but looking back, it's like, man, if we just had a few more people, we could have gotten so much more done. I'm not talking about the kind of thing like Apple does, where you have one guy working an entire year to save a transistor cost. A lot of companies just waste their talent, and so I think because of that, they don't get the best talent. They used to, probably when they started out. But then they got big and said, hey, we can just throw money at this, throw money at that. Yeah. But what that means is that somebody's doing something pretty boring most of their days. They should have spent a lot more money on the chips. That's really, that was the heart of the Amiga, other than the operating system. And they should, they had great ideas, but unfortunately just never spent the money necessary to make it happen fast enough. That's one of those places where with chips, it really, that's the thing you could throw money at and actually get better results. You look at NVIDIA, they do they come out like 10 new chips a year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're only on the market for 6 months, but they come out with 10 new chips a year.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that must be the end for us, because we're heading off to another event online now for tonight. But we're so honored that you could join us for this, and we're really, really happy to hear of your history, and would love to chat more with you in the future. Yeah,
we can do that.
Yeah, cool. Take care, and
bye, everybody.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. Take care.